This is about Lebanon and the Middle East. I am a Lebanese refugee in Denmark and then a citizen in Europe. But as many Lebanese abroad, always following the news and the situation in the beloved country of the Mount Lebanon, and it became expanded to a wider nation in 1920s, and as a collaboration between Christians and Muslims at that time. Two fractions, the Maronites and the Sunnite. The Sunnite were a majority in the region, and the Maronite were the biggest Catholic-like Christians in the area. They had all been, for times, especially the Maronites, like the Druze and others, suffering from some kind of suppression from the Ottoman authorities a century before. And then finally, with the new global leaders in France and England, who came out victorious from World War I and Versailles, a lot of things happened in the Middle East that changed a lot, really a lot, and made the current situation. Everything you want to understand about the Middle East, you have to go back and study the Versailles and the Paris agreements, and those 6 months they spent on going and coming, and the Arabic delegations and the Jewish delegations, and whatever happened from there has shaped the region for a very, very long and deeply profound time. And it set also a lot of things in motion. But right now I'm focusing maybe a little bit on Lebanon, but I'm going to speak a little bit also about Syria and what I think is going to be the situation there. And basically, well, Lebanon was was the country that was like founded on that idea of a minority for the Christians and maybe more Western-minded people with a group of Muslims, because as documents say that the Christians didn't want to have the country on their own. They didn't want to be the only Western-minded community, Christian community, having a state among all these Arab nations who are Muslim in their roots. So they wanted to be like part of the region because they are also Arabic, and many of them, they do not. When they call on God, they say Allah like the Muslims do, and they pray in a ways that the Arabs understand. So they are very much assimilated, and at some part also very much very much integrated, but at some parts also assimilated in the Arabic and somehow Muslim culture around them, and they did that wisely, that not to stand out. You have to defend your Christian state identity against your surroundings. That would make them weaker. So going along with a Muslim group and having this very beautiful nation, that was the foundation of Lebanon. And it should be like on Western model, having votes and having a parliament and kind of republic ways of life, so that people should agree on things and have a good legal system that could provide them with security and justice. And so Lebanon was established and later got its self-governing from France, and later due to several revolutions and suppressions from the French, and the leaders were set in prison and then brought out on the street again. A lot of things happened in the 20s and 30s, but then during World War II, Lebanon took its chance, like many other countries, to proclaim its independence from the French, whose rule they were under. But they were very influenced by French culture. So Lebanon is a country very much influenced by French culture, the second language in the country, and many Lebanese speak French but also visit France and have connections and relations there. I would say especially for the Christians, it has been like the source of nourishment because of the Catholic Church, of course, and because of the common culture. So when you go to Lebanon today, you will maybe look at the map and see many Lebanese more westernized and more French in their way of speaking and thinking than you would maybe think. And you will at the same time find groups who are very much influenced by the Turkish way and the Syrian way, especially in the far north. And then you will find people in the south um, also affected. That's the Shiite group. In the very north is the Sunnite Syrian pro group. I'm saying culturally Syrian pro group, not politically. So they are very much intertwined with Syria more than France. And then you have this group in the south, the Shiite, who are influenced by Iran for the most, and the Shiite thinking. And so you have mainly three cultures in one. Beside that, you have minority cultures of the Druze and other Christian, Armenian, and Lithuanian Protestant groups as well. So it's a complicated picture. That's just the Lebanese by themselves, and they tried to figure all this out. And things went well for periods, but also went wrong in the 50s, where they couldn't agree. And other countries, we had Egypt, Syria, Libya, Iraq at that time, besides the United States, Russia, Israel, and France, all trying to play a role, influencing that very little, very beautiful, and really nice place to be. It was called the Swiss of the East. It was called the Paris of the Middle East because of its open-hearted and open-minded way of living. It could, like, in a way, integrate religion with secularism. It could keep hold on its tradition and give respect and to each other's religious cultures. So side by side, for some decades, that was the truth. That was the ideal, and Lebanon lived up to it by trying to build institutions and communities. And we had this Fuad Shihab, the very strong general who did really good reforms in Lebanon in the 50s and 60s, with a lot of others, of course, and he could have done that without the Sunnites agreeing, because the political constitution in Lebanon is built up like that. So you could say it's a Christian Maronite president always, and the prime minister is a Sunnite, and the chairman of the parliament is a Shiite. And then the Druze have a saying as well, because they have this very small but very strong influential party. And so you had a community of Druze who also had influence and were part of that nation building situation we were in from the 20s up to the 50s. And so in the 60s it all prospered, despite some trouble Lebanon had because of these countries all around wanting to influence Lebanon or drag it in one direction or another. At one time we had Lebanese who wanted to go along with the Egyptian-Syrian United Arab understanding, and others, especially the Christians, but also some other groups who didn't want that. And then later we had the groups in the south who wants to go more pro-Iranian and pro-Shiite thinking, and maybe pro-Eastern thinking alongside the Russians, and some others didn't want that. And you had also both that Muslims and Christians divided into political affiliations. So you had these left-wings, very influential Christians who opposed the right-wing Christians, and saying they were like Nazis in the picture, in a way, like they looked at them as very far right. And the far right Christians, they said, well, we are organizing in that way because the phalanx, they were organizing in that way because they say that's the only way we can protect our identity from what's going on around us. The Muslims, well, they are a majority, especially the Sunnites, and if they go into a kind of collaboration with Egypt and Syria and other countries, where will we be in this picture? And we will lose Lebanon forever. And that's our homeland and nation. That's the biblical land as well, mentioned in the Old Testament and in the songs. And so they hold on to that, and they got help, and they sought help. And so later when the Palestinians came, this is just highlights, of course, of the Lebanese situation, but I hope they are so good highlights and key points that it will give a picture of Lebanon as both country, culture, and people. I'm trying as well to do that all at once, and that can be difficult. But in the 60s, we got the Palestinian issue, and the rise of the PLO and the Arab countries wanting to help them against Israel, and the two wars with the traumatic experience for the Arabs, losing and losing and losing, and then the Israelites standing stronger and stronger and stronger, and that was a big cultural what can you say, a trauma for the Arabs, for the Muslims, for the area, because they have never in 2000 years seen the Jews like rise like this. The Romans had experience with the Jews having their own places and at some time ruling Jerusalem, but that was old history. And so the Arabs and the Ottomans and the people around in the area was not used to seeing the Jews rising to a state and calling themselves Israel and claiming the land. And so especially the Palestinians were very annoyed by that. And some of them were like leaving their villages to fight, or maybe being asked to leave, and sometimes forced to leave. A lot of complicated history between these two groups. And so they organized in the PLO trying to fight back. And the only place they had the chance to do that was Lebanon, because Jordan shut them out in the 70s. They didn't want anything to do with that from their border. And you had the Saudis, nothing to do with that either. The Egyptians, well, they housed them, and they housed the talks, but they didn't want Sinai to be the place where things could happen. They've just lost the 6-day war, and Nasser was broken and all that. So the only place where they could see, oh, this is a democracy, and this is a place where there's no one strong leader who could shut us up. So in many Lebanese views, they became a state in the state. That's not only a Christian right-wing view; it's de facto. They became people who really just like took over. They did what they liked, as people could say. But that triggered a lot of reaction against them, and that finally triggered the civil war, because there were also interventions from nations and groups surrounding them, and not the least Israel, who is very concerned with its security, and being asking both Lebanon and the area to put a stop to this. But when it didn't happen, well, I think that had been, that's of course all secret files. I think it will come out in the future when everything is over, if we are here to witness it at all, with all what's going on today. But if it comes out one day, you will see that the security of the nations surrounding Lebanon had a lot to do with also triggering the civil war, and founding the small groups, and financing them, and making some of them stronger so they could fight. And so the civil war is a chapter for itself. 15 years. I was born during that civil war, 1978, and it was first 10 years of hope. Fightings erupts, then it stops, and people think it's over. That was it. They lashed out, and that's all. Now they're friends again. Then it starts over again and again and again. And alliances shifted all the time during these 10 years. Friends became foes, and foes got allied, and people turned, the fractions turned against each other. And of course, the biggest loser is the civilian population and people who were prospering from the country and life in it. But well, it took over like that because of the ideologies and the fear for the future. So as Gandhi always has said, it's the fear that drives people, and not anger. It's fear that's the true enemy of human understanding. And everyone fearful of the other, well, the war will erupt, and the troubles will come closer. And so it was about the identity of the Christians. It was also about the identity of the Palestinians. It was about the future of Israel. It was about the other Lebanese, and how they could see things, left wing, right wing, pro Egypt, against Egypt. You had some small Libyan and Iraqi groups operating as well. It became so complicated, all in that small, very beautiful and nice country, where you could go from the seaside to the mountain in 2 hours, and where people just were relaxed mostly. It all became so tightened up, in trouble. A lot of things, many details from that civil war. That's not my topic now. But then up to date, Lebanon in the 90s got over the civil war, at least on paper, but it remained on the ground, and we remained under the indirect occupation of the Syrian Alawite rule, and that rule was called democratic and republican and all that. But everybody knew it was one man and his followers that ruled everything, and they ruled with force of fire and fear. And so many people feared. I still get this in my stomach today because I was born in those conditions. I wasn't directly politically affiliated with anyone, neither was my parents, but we could feel the unrest that was around us, and people could get lost or disappear just all of a sudden, or could found cut up in 100 pieces, or a bomb could explode suddenly. So from the 90s and up to 2005, where Hariri got killed, the big prime minister and the billionaire who were protected by so much and so money, they got to him because he finally, really, after many years of patience, wanted the Syrians out. After especially Assad, the father, died, it became easier to try and say, listen, let's wrestle ourselves free from the Syrian control. And Syria had held this control on Lebanon for a long time. At the same time, we had a growing Shiite group who were getting affiliated with Islamic thoughts and religious ideas, especially from the Iranian Revolution. And they wanted also both to fight the Israelis, but also to like have a big saying in Lebanon. And they at sometimes also got into fraction trouble with especially the Sunnites, because they oppose each other ideologically and religiously. Some say it's an artificial thing, but on the ground it feels very deep. And then with the Christians, who are divided in two, and that's a strange thing, but many doesn't know this, that many of the Maronite Christians were pro with the sitting president, who were opposing the Syrians, the General Michel Aoun. He became pro Shiite and made an alliance with them, with his party. And maybe that was all politics, but that's the de facto thing that happened for almost 10 years or more. So every president we got in Lebanon after the civil war and the Syrian indirect occupation and control, it was with the blessings of the Syrians. And later, when the Shiite group became stronger, it was also with the blessing of the Shiites. And everything they had to get through in parliament, it was because they gave it access, and they took more and more control, and the north became more and more impoverished and problematic, and the country were more and more flooded with drugs and trafficking and some trouble that's hidden and not talked about because they have the guns. Who's gonna say anything about that? And those who tried, there were several journalists, both Muslim and Druze and Christians, who tried. They got killed. A bomb could suddenly explode, or he could got killed on the street or something. Very famous one is Nahar, a newspaper editor, Gibran Twaini, who really tried to be brave in that manner. And later, when they killed Hariri, that was a new area altogether, because the Syrians were withdrawing from Lebanon, but like, that was the last message. We killed your very precious and strong prime minister. Not everybody liked him or agreed with him, or maybe thought he was building the country, but really many Lebanese had many feelings for him, because that showed on the street with several millions standing there and being touched by the loss of this man, who were taking Lebanon financially and economically out of that deep pit, and that it had landed in. Big loss for Lebanon. Before that, we had many losses, and I'm not talking about the political losses. It's also really the country just got lost, small bird in the wind among these fierce nations around it. And so after 2005, okay, now it became more a kind of economic depressed state where it really didn't have the chance to stand on its feet and get up to raise to the challenge, and no transparency came over the country, and the institutions were still run by what people call corrupt ways. Like, you could have somebody affiliated with you, and you give them money, and they go and fix the roads. They don't fix it properly. They go and apply for some additional help. they get it, the money is lost, and all like that. Economical corruption under the surface made people more and more aware of that. And that's a trait in the Lebanese people. They have never been afraid of saying their opinion. They are basically from back in the 30s and 40s and 50s being raised by this way of speaking out. So Lebanese are used to say their opinion and speak about politics and oppose their leaders, and people seldomly feared before the Syrian control, seldomly feared to say something against another politician or a leader or a president. Nobody got prosecuted by that. There was a kind of mentality that gave way to some tolerance, but that all changed. And then we had in Lebanon, after 2005, a very complicated situation with a very strong Shiite group who got their, like as people say, they got their orders from Iran. We had a pro-Syrian group, both among Palestinians and what do they call them? The left-winged groups of Lebanese political parties, mostly led by Christians. And then we had these more Westernly, France, American, what can you say, influenced people and parties and groups, and most of the others just like part of their own religious and ethnical community. If you were like born a Muslim Sunni, well, you are part of that. If you were born a Maronite, you're part of that. And the people tried to interact and trade and be friends as much as they could in those circumstances. So we had what you call a failed state up until today, 2025, but a failed state with a lot of different shift in the controls. For 20 years we had the Iranians, before that the Syrians, and before that the troublesome times of the PLO. And so it never got the rest it needed to stand on its feet and to grow as an independent nation. So sometimes as a Lebanese, I wish my country had been floating out at sea, very far away from the reach of these countries. And maybe it could have been part of the European Union, like Cyprus, Southern Cyprus at least became. And so, not to forget that the Turkish influence later, and some far-reaching influence of the Gulf countries who really loved Lebanon, and they tried always to help the United Emirates. Before that, the Kuwaitis really love Lebanon very, very much. And before that, and with them, the Saudis. And now Qatar. And so everybody is also trying to have a foot in there, because somehow this country is just so influential, even so it's small, and it's a place where people find rest and like to be. At least that's how it used to be. But if you look at it today, some areas are okay, thriving and clean, and other areas, especially the very impoverished Sunni northern areas, they are in deep trouble. And so if you go up in the mountains and you visit the Christian sites, you can see they've got a lot of support over the years, not at least from the Catholic Church, whom they have been very good in contact with. And the Shiite, well, I'm not saying their streets are very cleaner, but at least they got the money, and they could build things, and they used it for weapon. Mostly they want to fight, and Lebanese doesn't like to fight. Mostly they were forced to fight. Even if you go back and look at the archives and look at those Bashir Jmayel phalanx and the others, they are saying we are fighting out of necessary. We have to do this. This is our identity and home country and place we can be. Or we're not gonna give it up again to some powers who will just control us and put us out of our independency. And so that's what happened to Lebanon, basically in main lines. And today, where is it headed? That's going to depend on the Arabic countries and the countries surrounding, especially those closest. And so the story of Lebanon is a story of culture and music as well, because it has really produced a lot of art and culture and musical pieces, alongside with Egypt, of course, and very inspired by the Egyptian and the Italian music. A cuisine that was once very famous and very well known for its variety, and getting inspired by the Turkish and Italian and Greek and Spanish cuisines, getting inspired by a little bit Eastern cuisine, And it developed its own because it had its own ways of doing it, and people love the Lebanese cuisine because it's neither too strong, neither nor too creamy in many ways. So it has this very beautiful balance of something that could be salty when you need it and sweet afterwards, and many kind of dishes that's colorful to the eye and beautiful in the mind. And as I met with many people who like Lebanon, especially soldiers who were there in the old days with the UNIFIL and from Denmark and other places, when I go somewhere, I say I'm Lebanese. Oh, I've been in Lebanon, or my father, or my friend, or something like that. And they use always to have good memories about and from Lebanon in that time. So it was so unfortunate that the country didn't have a very, very strong France-like or Turkey-like or United States-like power to just protect it and keep it out of reach of the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Israelis and everyone who want to put their hands on it. And that's the problem for Lebanon. And with Lebanon, it's a very beautiful area just stuck in the middle of a big crisis. And sometimes when I relate to my Lebanese identity, it's like you almost forget you are part of the Arab world and the Israeli-Arab conflict. It's like a nation that say, we want to live among these olive trees and the fine trees, and we want to have these beautiful resting evenings in the mountains, or going out to celebrate something nice in relaxation, or going to the seaside swimming, and then in winter up in the hills and the mountains skiing. And that's how maybe they and Lebanese would like to have spent their life, but they didn't. And why is that? That's a big question. One should always look inwards and say, well, there is also something wrong with the people, because if they could uphold this kind of notion, why did they fall into fights and troubles? And that's very true as well. So there is something also affecting people and not totally right that has made it like this. And maybe that's also a reflection for history and the future on the possibility of being one nation with many religious groups and ethnic, not ethnic, but same ethnicity, but it's more religious affiliations, groups and backgrounds, and pressed into an area of division, all going back to the Versailles. So Versailles became a beautiful birth for Lebanon, but an ugly prison for Lebanon as well, because with the division of the other areas and the way they developed, well, everything became part of that development.